I'm Austin Lugo.
I'm Andrew Harp.
This is With Nothing to Say.
Let's talk about Anatomy of Hell.
Before we get into this week's film, next week we're going to be watching Pulse. I wanted to watch a Japanese horror film, and you suggested Kurosawa. Is there a reason that you went with Kurosawa?
This is great. Well, yeah, I've only seen like two of his films, but they're both like I would say they're two of my favorite films of all time, and you had never seen them, so now is a good time to
No.
watch them. And there's a bunch of movies, but he has a bunch of other movies that are apparently really good that I haven't gotten around to, so it will be a good excuse to watch them these next few weeks.
Wow, it's very exciting. Well, I'm excited. I'm a bit tired.
Yeah.
Henry, Henry's actually been sleeping pretty well for a baby, but he is a baby. So if I'm running a little slow today, or for the next couple episodes.
Yeah.
That's probably why.
Yeah,
Still
that's fine.
getting into the whole being a father thing. But today we watched a movie, which, by the way, we could not have picked a
Yeah, it's a good what?
harder film for me to watch because I can't watch it with Henry. I could not watch it with Henry.
Why the fuck can't you watch it with Henry? He won't remember a thing. It doesn't matter.
I've watched a lot of stuff with Henry, and I probably would have watched almost anything with Henry, but I do have to have some limits. And this is just at least for me, and maybe you didn't have this same experience, and I've been anticipating this conversation because I can't tell if it's just if my own experience was just this or if this was uh perhaps a little more universal. But I mean it's called Anatomy of Hell and it
Yeah.
felt miserable. I mean it felt brutal, really
Yeah, it's a
brutal.
brutal film. Yeah. In a bad or good way. I guess like that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, I don't think it's a bad thing at all. It's not a criticism. It
Hmm.
very much does the thing I think it's trying to do, which is it just makes I've never seen a film with so much nudity that is also just so miserable, and I've never seen something less sexy when it comes to the human body. It's just so intense, man. I mean,
This is like one of the best movies ever. Like this like in my opinion, like it really is like one of the best, you know. And you know what? These past like few weeks I've had a really good time like going over a lot of Katrin uh you know,
yeah.
Bre Breja films. Breja. And out of all of the movies that I watched, and I didn't watch all of them, there were some I didn't that I skipped over.
Mhm.
But out of all the movies I watched, this is like maybe like the most like distilled, pure, uncut of Breja. Like this shit is like it's so like it's so all the movies kind of have like themes and ideas
Mhm.
like Anatomy of Hell, but there are more kind of like filmic things in it, story things in it. Like Fat Girl is about like these sisters who are out on vacation. And they have like a family and you know they have their family and stuff, and then one of the sisters like starts this relationship. She's like 15. She starts a relationship with this 20-year-old guy. Um, romance is romance is actually kind of similar to Anatomy of Hell, but there's still like a lot of like dramatic trappings. This
Mhm.
movie is just pure, uncut, just like pure like philosophy and id. And in fact, I believe that this movie is like adapted from a novel that she wrote called Pornocracy.
Mhm.
So and it's very writerly, it's very literary, but it's still really cinematic, I think, in its own special kind of way.
Yeah. I mean, despite the fact that almost the entire film takes place in a room with just two characters in it who don't even have names, just man
Yeah.
and woman, it is a very beautiful and yet deceivingly haunting and cruel and uncomfortable film. And just going into a film that has nudity and sex, which is something that I've always been a little uncomfortable with when it comes to film. Not that I think it should be censored or we shouldn't make films like that, but it's something that I've always struggled with in film, and this film
Yeah.
is a lot of that and very,
It's yeah.
I mean, they don't hide anything. They don't do anything to, there's no camera trickery. I mean, it's very much exposed and
Uh-huh.
it's
I think
intense.
all I think all the I believe I'm assuming that all of the close-ups of the woman's genitalia as a body double. I'm assuming that's
Yeah.
the body double because they say at the beginning of the movie like in a place card that a body double was used here and there. So I assume that that was the case with the close-up of her genitalia. I don't know, with nudity, I don't care at all. Like I really don't. I've never had problems with it. I don't have problems with violence. I don't have problems with nudity. I really don't. Like it doesn't bother me at all. But I can understand like a movie like I don't necessarily want to watch a movie that that's in it where it's nudity or it's sex in it. It's supposed to be titillating. I really don't. I'm not interested in that at all. I'm not interested to be titillated. Like, and Bridget movies are not that at all. They're not titillating at all. They're meant to be just pure. It's just all about like people. It's all about, especially all of her movies are pretty much more or less about men and women and sex and like the dynamics between the two. And this is what the movie is all about. Um, it's about men and women. It's about heterosexuality. It's about sex. Um, and it's just kind of like it's just like telling the truth, man. You know, it's just like being very, very. It's just her being absolutely 100% truthful about these things that pretty much no one like wants to really like talk about all that much, just because it's alarming. You know, it's scary to everyone involved. You know, like I love what she does. I love what she does with them both, right? Because they're both kind of like they're almost like composites for like the entirety of like their gender that they are, right?
Yeah.
And with that, she's able to kind of like create this sort of like conversation, right? Um, not that I don't think like she's all that concerned with like psychology or politics or things like that. She's more interested, I think, in just like action and what do the actions like mean.
Yeah. One of the things that I will celebrate about this film is I think they could have easily done this thing where there's a certain shock value to those scenes in the bedroom. And it's not that they aren't shocking. I mean, they are intense and violent, and there's something very, this idea that sex itself is penetration and violent and bloody and
Yeah,
cruel,
it
and there's
is. Yeah.
something twisted and wrong about the whole experience.
Hmm.
And I admire the fact that this movie immediately opens and it's like, this is what the movie's like. There's no
Yeah.
hiding behind anything. I mean, we open on a guy giving another guy a blowjob, and
Yep.
it's you
That's the
see his whole
Katrin.
penis.
That's the Katrin, like, yep, that's what it's all about, baby. That's the Katrin. I mean, you know, she doesn't give a fuck, you know, like her movies are just like this. They're all like this pretty much. They all have like, you know, like full frontal nudity, penises, like all kinds of, you know, it's just like, you know, movies don't really have that kind of stuff anymore, really. Again, I admire that tenacity. I admire just kind of like that, like, yeah, whatever, you know, just I love that.
It's a lot, and it throws it right in your face, and it doesn't try to be anything other than it is. And it is interesting that the film starts in a nightclub that is it's this high energy, right? This bouncy
It's like a
music,
gay club, I
the gay
think. It must
club,
be a gay club, yeah.
and that's really the only moment of like jumping around, a lot of movement, because the rest of the
More
film,
characters.
well, a lot more characters. The rest of the film is a lot of sitting around. I guess there's violent moments in it, particularly whenever the two of
Yeah.
them are having sex. Like those moments are not
Yeah.
fun experiences. They look
Right.
miserable, but there's this almost animalistic, which I guess we're trying to capture in the nightclub, how dancing captures us at our most feral. and there's something very instinctual about that experience. And of course, the obvious connection between dancing and sex, and dancing is sort of this ritualized version of sexuality, and it's this heightened, sexy version of sex, whereas sex in and of itself, there's something a little depressing about it. And I mean, almost the whole film, she's naked, and she's not wearing sexy lingerie, right? There's no, I mean, the underwear that she has
Mhm.
under it has like holes in it, and
Yeah, it's real as fuck.
and
Yeah,
right,
it's awesome.
yeah, yeah, and
Yeah. One thing that's kind of interesting too that I have to point out since you're unaware of this, the house is on the coast. I
mm,
think it's like on top of a mountain or whatever, like near the
yeah,
beach. For some reason, the beach location continually comes up in her movies. At one point, characters are at a beach at some point in the movie. I watched like probably like what, like four, five, six of her films,
yeah,
and they all have at least like one scene in which they're at some sort of beach,
huh,
which is interesting. And yeah, like, and it's interesting too because she, at the end of the movie, she's like, in a very kind of surrealistic way, I guess you could say. Like she's like pushed off right the cliff into the
yeah,
water or whatever. Um, yeah, I don't know. I had to point that out just because, like the location is really weird. The house is in the middle of nowhere.
yeah,
Because what happens is that she tries to kill herself. And I love that line when she like cuts herself and the guy asks like, "Why'd you do that?" And she's like, "Because I'm a woman."
hmm,
It's like that kind of to me like sets up the movie, like what it's about.
yeah, yeah. There's this idea that permeates throughout the film that to be female is to be cut, is to be exposed, is to bleed in the very literal sense of the masculine penetration and the female sort of wound almost. And I'm thinking about
Yeah.
this book that I read recently, Joyce Carol. It's this blonde, and she'll often refer to her own genitalia as this cut, right? This thing that
Yeah.
she can't get rid of
She's like
or
cursed, right? And
curse
yeah,
with it.
she like
Yeah.
talk it's like yeah, it's like I'm cursed with it. And the man, right, the gay man he's been paid to like have sex with her basically for 4 days or do
Mhm.
something together for 4 days. Um he kind of he goes on and on and on again about how like he's disgusted by her because she's like a cursed being basically. Like she's like an imperfect cursed like creation or something like that. Like that's more or less kind of like what he says about her throughout the film. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the man is gay, or at the very least
Yeah,
bisexual,
it's a very
pansexual,
interesting choice.
because it creates a very different perspective than, and I think it's an important choice, because if it's just a heterosexual male, I think there'd be this tendency to idolize her. And obviously, he has some very corrupt ideas of the female body.
He is like misogynist. They're misogynist. Gay men
Yeah.
can be misogynistic, right? Like that's the point. Like the point isn't like some people might think it's like trying to say something about like homosexuality, but it's not. It's like more
No.
saying like stuff about like gender, like and sexuality in general, and also just
Mhm.
like heterosexuality too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if he was heterosexual, it would kind of miss the point, because he would hyper, well, I mean, it is hypersexualized. It's a movie about sex in a very literal sense, but the sex would be hidden under this layer of, this way we try to make things beautiful, and sex is not a beautiful thing. It is violent and intense. And that's not to say it's a bad thing, but especially in these circumstances, it feels like something that we go to our most basic animalistic instincts, and it's something that we love and also hate at the same time, and we're our most exposed selves, and we're our self that we can't get rid of, right? It's this thing that we have to do. There's this, it's a compulsion. And that's how it very much feels like in this film, where they have to act in this way. They have to do these things, even though it is a cruel and violent act. They can't stop doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And or at least like it's an act that's cruel and violent because that's what the man like wants, right? Or that's like the kind of thing that the man wants to inflict, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like there's this, I don't know, there's just kind of like, again, it's like kind of hard to say, but like, yeah, like I think Brie, she's trying to kind of like say that like inside of the man is this, and this is expressed through the dialogue between the characters, like inside of men is this for some reason like inside like this desire to like hurt women or something like that, right? Like I think that's kind of like
Yeah.
where she's kind of getting at with men is that like this misogyny is sort of like, I don't know if it's like she's trying to say it's unavoidable, but it's just almost like, I don't know, like a part of nature or a part of like um I don't know, it she, but again, like I don't think she's trying to like make any like scientific like discoveries or anything like that. I think she's merely trying to transplant her experiences and probably the experience of, I like to think a lot of women, right? Like
Yeah.
a lot of women have probably had like maybe not necessarily this experience where they pay like a gay guy to have sex with them, but like, you know, just kind of like this experience that the sort of just kind of like this the horrible like disjointed experience of being like a woman and trying to like, I don't know, express yourself or be yourself or you know, try to love someone. You know, I think like she's trying to like get at that, right? She's trying to get at like a real experience, like a real like thing. um you know, she's trying to tell the truth as much as possible, and like, you know, and you know, the actors, again, like you said, you know, they really kind of, you know, bear it out, right? Like really
Yeah.
kind of like go at it in terms of just sort of you know, and this discussion of again, like, you know, just kind of like this distinction between like sex and violence, and yeah, for me too, I gotta say like Bria, like her films, like for me, the best part about them is the writing. Like, and I think she like originally was like a novelist and then she
Mm-hmm.
became a filmmaker, but I think she said like she always wanted to be a filmmaker. And so her films, the writing of her films are always amazing. It's always like really pitch perfect. And it's also like her movies are, despite their like just difficult subject matter, I had a good time watching her movies because they're audacious. They go off the rail all the time. Like they're just like, you know, they're kind of like fun to watch in that way. And they're also like intentionally like funny. Like they have like jokes in it like throughout her films. This movie might be the less jokey of her films, I would say. But there's still something about it that is occasionally funny. Um, especially like I was laughing, especially when like the man is talking to her and he's like berating her in this like really ridiculous way. I couldn't help but laugh because it's just so like, um, I think she's trying to say that like even the gay man, right? Even the man who's gay, the misogyny is so ingrained and it's so a part of his DNA that he like his rants are just they're just so like, you know, like they just they go
Mm-hmm.
on and on and on. They get more and more ridiculous.
You know, one of the things about this film that I find endlessly fascinating is if you had pitched this movie to me and told me the plot to this movie, I would have said
Yeah.
absolutely not. I'd say I have no interest in watching this movie. I don't want to
Mhm.
watch for the podcast. I don't want to watch it at all. It doesn't sound like an experience I want to have
Yeah,
because,
this is not really a movie you would go out of your way to watch. That and that's kind of like why I picked it, right?
which I'm
Honestly,
glad you
like
did.
yeah, I had never seen any of her movies before I suggested it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I knew that this was just like one of those movies where it's like, I don't know if Austin's gonna like this shit. I don't know. But whatever, it doesn't matter. At least it's gonna be interesting.
And I think it's valuable to watch films like this, especially if you don't like these kind of films. I think it's one thing if these are the types of films that you watch, but I think it's much more valuable for people who don't typically watch this stuff, even though it is a really hard watch. I mean, this was a really hard watch for me. It was only an hour and 20 minutes, and it goes by quickly, which you wouldn't
Yeah.
think, seeing that it's mostly just two people inside a single space talking, but it goes
But
by
that's why her
super
writing is so
quick.
good. Her writing is so good. Like that really propels it.
Yeah, it pushes the whole thing forward, but it's also for me a very miserable and intense experience. And just after the film, I needed to just step back in a way because it
Yeah,
was a
they're like
lot.
that.
It was a lot for me. It was a very overwhelming experience, and I just felt so. I mean, it's an hour and 20 minutes of just feeling uncomfortable and gross inside of my own skin, like my own
That's
flesh is
awesome.
peeling
Good.
off
You
of
should
me.
feel like that. As a man, you should feel like that. Like you should, like every man should watch it just because, like, it's so, like, yeah, because, yeah, when you watch it as, like, a man, you're just kind of like, oh, fuck, like, man, like, this shit is not going well. You know what I mean? Like, this is not, the world is really fucked up.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know, man. I like shit that makes me feel like really bad. I watch these movies again and again. Like I watch like a bunch of her movies. They're
hmm
so compelling. They're so compelling. I don't know what it is. It's just like she is so like has an astute maybe I don't necessarily agree with everything, she posits
hmm
in her movies. Um but I love her films. There's something about them that are so astute. Again, in their writing. Their writing, it comes down to that where it's just like, her vision is so clear. Her movies are clearly, I love them too because like they're clearly made, written, directed, conceived by one person, right? And
yeah.
for me, that's what it's all about. So I know what you mean when you say like, oh, it was so exhausting. Da 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 da. I totally agree with you, you know, but I don't know. I guess like you and I just have different sensibilities in that
For
like
sure.
this kind of thing for me is just like what movies are all about. This is what like it's all come to.
And I think it should be celebrated because I mean, as you pointed out, this is a movie that is very much made by a specific person, and every part of her. I mean, the director's voice is the narrator of this
Right.
piece, so she could not be more ingrained in this movie, and it feels so much of her. It feels almost as if we're reading a diary. It feels like a very personal film, and not in the sense of the literal biopic or autobiographical film, but more in a spiritual sense. And it just feels like this is her truth and this is how she sees the world. And
Hmm.
there's quite literally no censorship here. It's allowing her to make the exact film and do the exact things that she wants to do and expose that violence and terror and horror, but without it being in a way that's traditionally horrific or terrifying. I mean, I guess the first time we meet the woman and the second time we see her, she attempts to kill herself first with
Right. Fraser.
the razor on her wrist and then on her neck, and that's
No, she doesn't. No, no, I
well,
don't think
she
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 does do
doesn't
that with her
she
neck.
doesn't do the neck one, but he
He
imagines
imagine, yeah.
he
Which is a
imagines that.
great image. Another fucking great image, right? I totally forgot about that one, right? Where she's like walking out and she like does
Hmm
it like on her neck real quick and he imagines that. Oh, so good.
And it's this idea that I don't know that. I mean, the first thing that I think of when I see the red, the blood, especially that kind of blood, because it looks more like the blood of the 1970s, that really rich
Sure,
red,
yeah, it was
almost
like it's
paint,
like
kind
over
of
the top,
thicker
yeah.
over the top. And it's not a coincidence, of course, that on the second or third day she's on her period, and right
Yeah.
there's that sense of blood, of losing
Yeah, yeah.
life.
There's a lot of discussion about the period.
Hmm.
Um, that is very interesting. Um, that part of the movie stuck out to me. I love that part of the movie where there's a lot of stuff about the discussion of the period, right? Like I love I love describing the period as like it's bleeding with no wound,
Yeah.
like that's awesome. I love her like her the description of the tampon, right? And like how it's it was like obviously created by a man because the tampon, the way it's designed, goes out of the way to ensure that there is absolutely no pleasure when you put it in, right? Like there's it because it's like because her point is that like men, they don't want to give like women pleasure. They don't want to feed into their like desires or anything like that. So it's obviously it was created by a man because it's this thing that has absolutely nothing. There's nothing titillating about it. It's just like
Mhm.
oh, it's just only like to serve like this purpose of your fucking disgusting period or whatever, right? Like this man who designed it, and so you can just be it can be you know uh sop it up and forget about it. So I just love that discussion, and of course they drink the period blood.
They
Looks
do.
like it looks like pink lemonade. It looks pretty good.
One of the things that has been running in my mind since I watched this film the other day is, and I don't have an answer to this, and I don't know if there is necessarily an answer to this, but what is her motivation for hiring him? Because originally when she says she's going to pay him, it's not even to have sex with her, it's just to watch her. But what is she trying to get out of this whole thing?
And so the movie can happen. Again, they're like composites. The
Yeah.
logic doesn't make any sense. Well, they have that thing where like she like he basically allows her to go down on him to suck his
Yeah.
penis. And they have kind of like this conversation and stuff like that. And so I think they just kind of have like this weird connection, right? And so I think like that had something to do with it.
Mhm.
That probably is just why. And again, like she is like this like lonely, dejected woman. And let's just fuck it, like let's go, let's just lock ourselves away and see what happens, kind of thing. So that's like the best explanation. But again, like I don't know. It's just whatever.
I love the house that they're in. Not even the house. I mean, it's really
Yeah, it's good.
just
Yeah.
the room because they never, I don't think they ever go into any other room other than that room that the bed is in. It's so bare and empty. And I mean, it is not warm. It is not inviting. This is not a place that you would want to live or to be. I mean, not only the house itself that's on this cliff, on this beach, but even the room with these floors and walls that are just bare and look cold and miserable and
Yeah.
really just reflect this experience that they're having. I mean, I think this film is so much about this idea of exposure, right? Exposing yourself of not only exposing yourself, but then the selves that we hide, even when right we have nothing to hide behind, even when we don't have, when it literally is just our flesh, and that's all we have, and still this sense of hiding the self of the self inside the self, and how in sex. there really is no hiding, right? It's that moment that you kind of are your most primal self. It's something that you can't escape, no matter those feelings or emotions, all those things that you try to bury and hide away. In those moments, you can't. They're gone. You have to be this version of yourself to participate in this act, and that is a very scary place
Hmm.
to be and to be in. And it's very clear that she has control almost the whole film, even when he's committing these violent acts upon her. I mean, there's that one scene that I still don't really get. It's like this moment that stands out, and
Hmm.
I don't know if I'm reading too much into it or if I'm missing the point, but that moment where he leaves the house and he goes out
Hmm.
and he gets the hoe.
Yeah.
I
And he puts it in her, yeah. And it's like sticking out.
yeah. Any ideas about why
Well, after
that?
he does it, right? Like, isn't like after he like puts it in her and and she wakes up, doesn't she say
Mhm.
something like, I know you wanted to kill me or you wanted to kill me last night or something like that? I think
Right.
that's like connected with that, right?
Yeah.
Like he wanted to kill her, but instead he decided not to. I think that's just kind of like the point of that scene, more or less.
Right. Yeah, because there is, I mean, just thinking of the idea of earth to earth and kind of
Hmm.
digging a grave, and then also
Right.
the sharp tendons on the hoe itself, and then putting it inside her.
Hmm.
It's an act that is strange.
It's almost like he's stabbing her too,
It
you
is.
know?
It is like that. Yeah. Like this rusty old hoe that he is attacking her with. And it's an odd moment.
Yeah, that's cool. I like how that's just like one night. Like that's one night. Like it's across 4 nights, right?
Hmm.
Like in each night they do something a little bit different. Um, but yeah, like that night is like she just kind of like falls asleep with like this thing inside of her. Um, and yeah, I don't know. There's that one night too. There's that one moment too, right? Of like there's like the two childhood like flashbacks. I love the one
Hmm.
with like the baby bird. That one
One
is
intense
fucking
moment.
awesome. Where they like compare, she like compares like the image of kind of like the vagina with
Hmm.
its like pubic hair to like that of like a baby bird, right? Like
Yeah.
it cuts right from
It's a great
the
cut.
image to like her like the of her like vagina to like the baby bird, and
Hmm.
it's like I think like the guy right of him like going up and like feeding the baby birds and then accidentally killing one that he puts in his pocket,
Yeah.
and then he like smashes it on the ground. Yo, like that is one of the best scenes ever, dude. Like some stuff like that I just love just because like that juxtaposition between like those images and then it like follows into that like that crazy like incredible like childhood moment that's like kind of like somehow in a really kind of like powerful way kind of sort of connected with this like experience of like death and sex and death.
Yeah.
Like it's just brilliant, it's just so like it just works like in ways that it's hard to describe.
Yeah. And I mean, those two moments are really the only moments in the film, other than the beginning and sort of the end, that we ever get the luxury of leaving that room. And they're beautiful moments, intense moments. And I love those moments. And part of me is like, I really wish there was more of those moments because she has this magnificent ability to tell a story, even though her writing is so beautiful, just a nod to her own filmmaking abilities, that you can see that you can watch that entire scene with the bird and you see him feeding the bird and putting it in his pocket and climbing down the tree, and you know what's going to happen, and you don't need any explanation. You don't need any dialogue to tell what's going to happen, and just to see it and feel it and experience that moment and to be brought back to being a child in that moment and kind of running around and the violence and the anger and juxtaposing that with the other scene of the little girl who, in order to get the attention of these boys or in order to sort of be part of the gang, in order to be included, has to expose herself. It's, these moments are beautiful and magnificent and don't require any explanation beyond the visual. But I also understand why those are the only moments that we get of that. I mean, we don't get, it's not a tree of life thing where we're getting their whole life and all of the moments leading up to this moment because
Mhm.
you, just like these two characters, have to be stuck in this room. I think it's really
Yeah.
interesting that even though it takes place over 4 nights, we only see them at night and we only ever see them outside of the beginning of the film in the club. This is really the only place we ever really see them. I guess this the pharmacy and right outside the pharmacy.
Yeah.
And so we are trapped in this space in the same way that they are, and we can't escape. And there's a sense of claustrophobia in a weird way, even though the walls are bare and everything feels really big, but at the same
Hmm.
time, you can't ever leave. You're just always stuck there. And those two scenes happen, I think, on the first night. So
Yeah.
they happen pretty early in the film, and then you never get to leave that room again, other than
Nope.
just outside of the house. And so
Well,
you're,
yeah, and then he has that, and he meets up with that guy at the bar.
oh yeah, at the end.
Yeah, where they kind of, just kind of have like a misogynistic conversation, basically.
Hmm. Again, he goes back to those ideas of sex being violence and violating, and this very ironic dichotomy that exists in misogyny, where at the one end, right, you want a woman to be this sexual machine that you can control, but then the very fact of them acting on the thing that you want them to do, to have sex, makes them a slut, right? Makes them
Yeah.
evil, and so it puts a person in a place that they can't ever exist. It's a catch-22, right? Because whichever thing they do is wrong, and they are
Yeah.
punished for that. They're supposed to be both virginal, but then also right, not stuck up, and they need to be these things simultaneously
Yeah.
and all of the time because they
Yeah.
always need to
The
be. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say like purity and virginity is a thing that comes up a lot in our
Hmm.
movies. It comes up a lot. Um, yeah, that is definitely a common subject that comes up. Like, and sort of kind of like the how like the virginity thing is just kind of like, sort of absurd, a little ridiculous. Like it's kind of made up, you know. Um, but yeah, yeah, there is kind of like this like ultimately the man kind of has like this control, right? And it's all about kind of like uh women like are sort of like at all times an afterthought is kind of like what like I think the movie kind of posits a little bit.
Mm.
Um and again, I just like the choice of the fact that the guy is like supposed to be a gay man, right?
Hmm.
Because I just like again, people think that the movie's being homophobic or whatever. I don't think it is. I think it's just sort of like saying that like men are misogynistic no matter what.
Well, it's almost positing as if there is this competition, even right, even in someone who, in a very animalistic sense, is not competing with a woman.
Yeah.
He is still There's still this sense of need to create this separation and to dominate and to control, even though, as he says himself, he's glad that he hasn't had to involve himself in any way with a woman, that he can basically cut the entire gender out of his married
Yeah.
life. Because to him, even to a homosexual, right, even though he's gay, he still has this need to create this division between man
Yeah.
and woman,
Like he
right?
talks too like about like how like having sex with men is just like less gross, basically, like making the argument that it's like less disgusting or something like that, right?
Hmm.
Like and that like having sex with a woman is just kind of like this gross, like abject thing, right? Because it's just like I don't know. He like again he goes on these like incredible rants, incredible misogynistic rants about like
Hmm.
why, right? Like kind of justified like why he's gay or whatever. Um, but he kind of like I wouldn't say falls in love with her, but she ends up getting under his skin. I think is the
Hmm.
best way I can describe it.
Yeah, I mean, I think of after he leaves the house for the last time, and even though at the beginning of the film, and this is, I guess, his arc, he he kind of has this sense of better than thou, and I'm only here for the money, and blah blah blah, right? And you're the one paying for the hooker. You're the you're the one that should be frowned upon. He feels gross and dirty for take. I mean, he takes the money in the
Yeah,
end, but
right. Yeah, yeah.
he feels like
He,
he's the
he
one
resents her immediately.
immediately because he's had this experience that she doesn't necessarily have, and he resents her for that
Right. Yeah, that's true too.
because he's changed and she hasn't. And he thinks that, I mean, it's an effect of his own ego, right? It's an attack on who he is because he thinks that he's so wonderful and amazing. And at the end of these 4 days, he hasn't, right? There's almost it's almost like a cuckolding almost
Yeah.
in which he's unable to pleasure her in the way that he thinks that he can, and she feels that she needs. And so it's this weird, almost invisible cuckold situation where he almost cuckolds himself, or she cuckolds him
Yeah.
without there having to be that other person. Almost that sense that this inadequacy that can't be escaped and he can't live without. And he goes back to the house, right? Even after he has that misogynistic talk with that man, and it's barren, it's empty, it's abandoned, right? As if she has run away or never existed, uh, or he's imagined the whole thing or whatever. And then of course he sees her outside and pushes her off a cliff.
Yeah. 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 And yeah, I'm trying to think of like any other like really great like dialogue and stuff because again, like I just like when you watch a Brie film, like her films like they blow my mind every time, like with its dialogue. Like it's so good.
Hmm.
And I'm trying to remember some good ones. I mentioned like a lot of like really good ones
Yeah.
like throughout our discussion or whatever. Um like um again, I was really like captivated with like the discussion of like the period, right? And the discussion of like, of the tampon like that for some reason I thought that was really amazing. And um yeah, and it's just like it's just again, this is like pure distilled Brie. Like it's just totally like no story really at all. The characters are composites of like the different genders essentially. And yeah, I think it just again, it's her trying to like I think point out like this crazy like inadequacy between the genders, right? Like this completely unresolved eternal conflict
Hmm.
that just sort of reigns at all times through all cultures. I think they talk about that, right? They talk about like how like I think she has that like she says that like, in all societies, all cultures, maybe not every single one. I think there are some that are more what's the word, matriarchal, right,
Hmm.
than others. I think
Yep.
that's the case. But for some reason, like through all society and cultures and throughout history, like you men have always tried to lock away women, right, or kind of like
Hmm.
keep them, to try to protect them from themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of like kind of like the historical kind of like pinpoint that Catherine is trying to like say um of like, like, well, why is that? Like, why is that? Like, well, why does it have to necessarily be this way?
Hmm.
And she obviously like doesn't have like any answers at all. She's not really interested in answers. She's more interested in kind of like through her movie and through her writing. And I want to get the novel. I really want to read it.
Yeah.
Because I really loved it that much. Um, she's just trying to like point out like an experience that people have, like men and women. That's really what it's all about. And of course, she does it through the language of cinema, which in cinema, you can't do everything in cinema, but you can do a lot of things. You can make images come true, like imaginative images. And I don't know. I just think that like she just does it so successfully.
No, I think you make a really good point about. I'm losing my train of thought. Oh, I was okay. It's coming back to me. But one of the things, there's something very literary about this film, and we talk about the language of cinema and the fact that she is a novelist, and we talk about the beautiful dialogue and the writing here. And one of the first things that came to my mind when I thought of sort of the literary connection was a piece like The Yellow Wallpaper, in which, right, we watch a woman go insane because she's trapped
Yeah.
by, right, these masculine sources. And in the same way, I think it's interesting that he's the only one that ever
Yeah.
leaves the room. Once she's in that room, it's almost as if she's imprisoned in that
That's
room.
true. Yeah. I,
And
I I
and
didn't realize that she never leaves her room once she enters.
and and there's the sense of, yeah, I mean, obviously the patriarchal, I mean, it can't be escaped. And the point I was trying to get at earlier that I lost my train of thought about was, fuck, why is it like it's
It's
like
okay.
right on the tip of my tongue, and like the moment I get to it, it's like it escapes. Oh, solutions. This idea that you make this really good point, that she brings up all of these questions and brings up all of these ideas and emotions, but she's not there to give you solutions. And I think it would be
Yeah.
problematic if she were to try to give solutions, and would kind of miss the point of the film, because frankly it's not her responsibility to give you the answer. Like that's you, the viewer. That's your job. That is the torch that has been handed to you. Is she is exposing these problems that we're all aware of, but maybe we don't want to look at or see, and forced to watch it. And now you have to go out and find the solution. You have to go out and find the answer, because uh, she's not going to spoon feed it to you. And there is no easy answer here. There is no way to just fix this problem. And I think that's what makes this film so tough to watch,
Yeah.
is there isn't a way to just fix it and it'd be okay and everything to be better. It's that it's complicated, and maybe it can't be fixed, and maybe it is fucked up, and maybe we have to recognize it. And until we can recognize it and look at it straight on, because we don't want to look at it straight on, because
Yeah.
to look
Yeah. It's
at it straight on
disgusting.
is gross and
Yeah.
disgusting.
It sucks.
We want to hide it in, like, right, in sexiness and quote unquote beauty. We don't want to be exposed to the reality of it. And that's what's so strange about this movie, is it is simultaneously so beautiful and yet so ugly. It's not hiding behind these opulent visuals, but they feel so raw that you can't help but
Yeah.
just be enamored by the whole thing.
Yeah, and it's just really kind of like again, like yeah, like that it's coming from a very strong place of truth that of course like, people would be like extremely uncomfortable with it. Just for that point alone, I don't even think it's like the nudity or the sex or things like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I just think that people think that like if you look up like letterbox reviews and stuff of like Bria movies, like it's just like the dumbest people of all time, that are trying to like make sense of these films because they've basically have only watched like Wes Anderson films and Marvel movies and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So they can't like wrap their head around like someone who's really, really trying to like squeeze out, truth, in some kind of way, shape, or form, that's really trying to like say it like it is, Um, and I think people have a really hard time with that. People also want like their movies to be wrapped up in nice little bows, right?
Yeah.
They want everything to be wrapped up nicely and tightly and everything gets in his right place or whatever. Um, Not that this movie isn't like this. I think it is. Like the mise en scene in the film is really good. Like
Hmm.
the way that like everything is staged and set up, like it's really good. And it's not easy. Like this shit isn't easy to do. Like having actors do this is not easy to do. Having them to act well in these situations, that can't be
Hmm.
easy to do. And they do a really good job. She's able to like wring out like so much like a great performance has out of both of them.
Yeah. Well, that does put us at just about an hour, and we've talked a lot
Okay.
about this film. Should we give some final
Yeah, we
thoughts?
can. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Go ahead.
I will go ahead. So I'm looking at the letterbox right here, and this is definitely has the most wild of any of the letterbox we've ever done. It is all over the
it
place, and
it's not as bad as some other movies I've seen, but yeah, maybe of what we've done on the show.
definitely for the show, I think it's the most not necessarily that skewed to the left, but it's
Yeah, is
everywhere,
all over the
right?
place, right?
It's all
Yeah,
over
that
the
that
place.
that indicates to you that like yeah, it's a controversial film.
And I think I'm of the same opinion as you that when you look at a lot of the reviews for this film in particular, which is my first experience with Catherine, there's a lot of people that when you look at their lower ratings, they're kind of missing the point, or or I
Right.
think probably more accurately, they don't want to see the point, and they don't want to accept that it's a tough film and it's a hard film, and a good film should make you feel things like this. I mean,
Yeah.
I think what makes a bad movie isn't the direction, it isn't the writing, isn't the story. I think at the core, what makes a bad movie bad is you leave the film not feeling anything, right? Having no sense of having changed. And I think this film does that incredibly well. And that's something that should be celebrated about this film.
Yeah.
And again, as I pointed out earlier, if you told me the premise to this movie, I would have said absolutely not. I would never watch this movie. I
Yeah.
I could see a world where I never watch this movie because it's very challenging for me, not only in the sense that it's a challenging film, but because it is topics and things that I myself get very uncomfortable with in film, which there's not a lot. I mean, you go as violent as you want,
Okay.
bloody.
Really? Really as violent? Okay.
Okay,
Well,
that's not
and
true
if you
either.
after I'll recommend just just the nastiest shit
I'm very
next time.
squeamish. I'm very squeamish, and
Yeah.
my tastes definitely like are very like 1940s talkies, and
That's fine. That's fine. I'm glad that that's the case because that's not. I mean, I love those movies too, but I'm glad like if your tastes were exactly like mine, it would be really boring.
be a very
Like it would
boring
be
talk.
boring to
That's
talk
why,
to. Yeah.
and that's why it works because
Yeah, that's why
our
it works.
even though like our I think we love a lot of the same things, our sensibilities are so
Yeah,
different
it's true.
that it
Yeah.
forces us to challenge each other and watch things that
Yeah.
maybe we wouldn't necessarily watch on our own. And
It's true. Yeah.
this is probably the most extreme
It's up there.
example of that
Wait,
of
compared to like Holy Mountain or The Devils or I'm trying to think what else.
I think this is harder to watch than Holy Mountain or The Devils or
Okay.
Audition. Although I think
Audition.
Audition was
Yeah.
really hard to watch,
Really?
and-
Wow. I love Audition so much, man.
which we're watching another Japanese horror film. So
Right.
obviously it
Yeah.
wasn't too hard to watch. And
Right.
it's been a long time since we've done a Japanese horror film on podcast. So I'm excited. But yeah, it was a film that challenged me, and I'm very happy that I watched it. I'm very happy that I had
Yeah.
the experience. I think I need a break before I watch another one of her films, but she is someone whose films I do want to see because she is very much an auteur, is very much has her own voice, which I think is really all you can ask for at the end of the day. And yeah, at an hour and 20 minutes, I think it's the perfect length for this movie.
Yeah,
It doesn't
especially
feel
since again it's stripped down totally.
because it's so stripped down. I think if this film went much longer, it would just, I mean, it's for me, it's such a intense experience that I can't be in this space too long. And so I'm happy that it's this length and I have no real complaints overall. So I'm going to
Uh-huh.
give this a very strong 8 out of 10.
Yeah. Yeah, I would give it like a 9 out of 10, I think, at the end of the day. Just because like I had a really good time like watching these like Brie films. They're amazing. They're really, really good. And like to me, this is like the again, like I said earlier, the purest distillation of her thoughts, her writing, kind of like her themes, the things that she's trying to get at. So I gotta give it a high rating just because like it's one thing to like kind of like make a movie that's about something and then kind of like write a story that kind of like surrounds it that has like, multiple characters, dramatics, things like that. I feel like making a movie like this is maybe a little bit harder just because you're kind of like, again, kind of like stripping everything back to its like bare necessities. And I feel like a movie like that isn't necessarily like easy to market or explain or anything like that. So in that regard, I find it to be a very brave, effort. And so I got to give it a 9 out of 10.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you all for listening. You can find everything I do at Austin Lugo.
I'm at Letterboxd RETR0 Andrew.
And you can find this podcast wherever you hear podcasts. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And with nothing to say, thank you all for listening.
Thanks again.